And welcome back. Well, you can see we took care of a couple things off camera, nothing major. Cover those with you now. Went ahead and got our hood taken off, which was the electrical connector for the light on that side. And then we had the hose connection on this side for the coolant sprayers, which are located in the hood. Now, unlike our 2009, this one, it actually had a disconnection point right here, so we didn't have to cut into this, which was nice. Went ahead and took our positive cable off. Remember, we had our negative disconnected earlier. Went ahead and took our positive off and went ahead and got our reserve tank of electrons just kind of out of here. Again, looking to create some space. And as you can see, with the hood off, you've got a lot more light that's accessible in here to kind of help us with our disassembly, as well as frees up a lot of space, especially when you go to pull the block out of here. And we went ahead and just took our accessory belt off. That's just a 3/8 ratchet on this particular tensioner. That'll fit right into the square opening on the end there and allow you to take the tension off and take that belt out. So what we're going to do next is get the alternator out here and the power steering pump out of here. The alternator is just a main battery positive charging cable, and then our field control cable here. And then you've got your 2 bolts up front on either corner. Now this will be a little tough to remove because it's got a bushing in there that draws in when you tighten these to pinch it to the bracket. So you kind of have to pry that out a little bit. But I'll show you a little trick for backing off those spacers, so when you go to reinstall it, it makes it easier. And you've seen me do that in a previous video as well. The power steering pump with the accessory belt off, you can see that we can just rotate the pump until a hole in the pump pulley matches up with either one of the 3 bolts. Once we get those 3 bolts out, this assembly usually has enough slack in the power steering hoses that we can just take this and usually just kind of lay it off here in the corner and kind of get it out of the way. And then we'll look at getting the electrical connection off of the AC compressor. And there's 2 bolts on the front that go up into the timing cover, and there's 1 main bolt, usually back center, that holds it to the block. And then once we get those undone, we can then hopefully, like we've done before, take this compressor and just kind of peel it off to the side. And usually we can kind of just get it to lay right here because these lines are flexible. Again, we just want to be careful with it because we definitely don't want to damage a line and end up discharging the system. Now, I have ordered some new parts for here. These lines, albeit they're working fine now, but they're just looking kind of dingy and beat up. Not that to say they needed to be replaced, but we're just being proactive here. Went ahead and ordered a new set of low pressure lines and as well as the high pressure line. Because one thing we will also be doing is replacing the front steering rack on this truck. It does have a slight leak, and I'll show that to you here later. So since we're going to put a new rack on it, might as well go ahead and change out the lines while we're here. And you may or may not have seen this in a previous video. Notice that right here we've got a nice leak of some kind, possibly transmission fluid. By the looks of it, it looks like it's leaking right here, or right around here where these crimps are at. So what I went ahead and did and just ordered a new transmission line set. So it'll be the lines that go into the transmission and come all the way forward and then hook up into here. So what happens is you see these little fittings here. So from these fittings forward, this is what they think they call just like a jumper piece. But from these fittings back all the way to the transmission, it's entire sets. We've got from here back, and then of course we'll replace that when we get to it. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and we're going to continue to bag and tag our bolts. I'm going to get the label printer out here so we can start labeling some of these electrical connections, and then we'll work on getting these, start stripping away this harness. We may get all the upper end stuff done in this video, or we may have to break it up into a few videos, trying to keep them to about the 30-40-ish minutes in length. We may have one that goes the occasional hour or so, but you know, just trying to help manage time, I guess. With that being said, I'm going to continue to work on doing things like getting the alternator out of here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our alternator out. I want to show you a couple things. I went ahead and removed this idler pulley here just to make it easier to get to this bolt. Now, normally you don't have to do that. Normally that bolt will clear this idler pulley and you can get it out. But the alternator was sitting kind of weird, and then once I got it out, I discovered why. But the first thing we discovered is that this connector right here wasn't locking to the top of the alternator. Now, this is your field control. This is what the ECU uses to basically, control on-off state and field duty of the alternator, so it can kind of control the output of the unit. And that won't lock in place. I actually didn't even have to release the clip. I could just reach up and kind of pull on the connector, and it came right off the top of the alternator. And I'll show you why. Now, I'm not saying anyone did this intentionally, but I find it hard to believe it would have wore itself away unless this alternator just been taken out so many times. But this is the back of the alternator, obviously. This is that connector on top. Now, in between here, in between these two raised up partitions that the connector slides on, you can just barely kind of see the outline of the little center tab. And that center tab has been wore completely down, where that connector no longer locks in place. So it actually, other than friction fit, it's you're able to get that connector off of there. So we may look at just go ahead and replacing this particular unit. Again, not that there's anything currently wrong with it. It is a Denso unit, so that tells me this is either A, the original alternator, or B, it has been replaced, but it may have just been replaced with another Mopar unit, because Denso would be OEM in this case for Mopar. At least on these 1500s it would be. I believe it's also the same for the 2500s as well. Now, the other thing that happened is that the reason why that front bolt, the one on this side, wasn't clearing that pulley was because this alternator was kind of sitting in there low. In other words, this end of the alternator was sitting a bit low. It wasn't quite squared away in that mounting bracket. And that is because the spacers on the back half of the alternator, you'll see it here, weren't pulled in. You'll notice they're flat. They're flat with this bracket on both sides, or almost completely. That one's got a little bit sticking up there, but it's mostly flat. That one is pretty much flat. And that's what you would normally do if you're going to install this alternator. You'd back these bushings out so they're flat with the back of the bracket, and that way it'll slide right into place. And whoever tightened this up, either these sleeves are frozen, or when they torque the alternator down, they didn't apply enough force and it didn't pull these forward and pinch this in place, which is why this was kind of sitting in there a bit, kind of slanted, causing the alignment of that bolt not to want to come out. But what I wanted to show you was, and I don't think I can, I can't do it. I can do it on this one. What you can do on these is when you go to install these, again, what happens is it takes this sleeve and kind of pulls it forward so it pinches it in the bracket. So you just kind of have to back these out. And there are a couple of different ways you can do it. One way that I've done it to pull these forward is to, I think I can do it this way. Is that I've just gotten a kind of a deep well socket, put a deep well socket on here, threaded the bolt on backwards that you see me doing here, and then once you meet that, and I'll go get a socket and show it to you because it'd be easier to see it, you can get this bolt to kind of pull this sleeve backwards and flush that up. And I've also done this before where you can get a C-clamp on this and just kind of, come to C-clamp at an angle and then push this out. But let me go get a deep well socket and I'll show you what I mean. One moment. And welcome back. So I just grabbed a 1/2-inch socket just so that the back of it was big enough to feed the bolt through, so it's going to feed through the hole that the socket head would normally go into. And in this case, I just happened to grab a inch and a 1 1/16 inch socket, which is, if you look over here, this will fit and it'll accept the sleeve as well as the indentation, the little half wall here. And the socket will fit like that over the ear. And then we can take our bolt, again, just thread it in. Now, you can see here that we've got quite a bit of shank on our bolt, so this shallow well won't actually do what we need it to do, but I'm just going to thread it in here just to kind of show you. And eventually that should stop on us, yeah. So what you want to do is basically, which is why a deep well would have been better, but you can kind of get the idea is that when you get all this assembled and this bolt is pressing up here, as the bolt presses down on this, it will in turn then pull up on this sleeve, allowing you to back that sleeve out so you can go in the install. You know, just be gentle with it. You don't want to put a lot of torque on it when you do that, because you definitely don't want to mess up threads in your alternator bolt. If you're worried about messing these threads up, just find yourself, you know, a shorter bolt, just something that matches the same thread pitch, and you can get the job done. But we spent enough of a detour on that. I'm going to continue to peel stuff off this engine here, and I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. You can see we got our power steering pump out of the way, and just like I was commenting earlier, it's just 3 13mm bolts in the section of the timing cover here, and you just rotate the pulley in front until one of the holes in the pulley, as you can see here, lines up with the bolt head, and you can take those 3 bolts out. I also removed this bracing, or this coupling piece, or I guess you can call it a brace piece, that was clipped to the 2 return lines, because there are 2 return lines on this setup. There's a return line that goes from the cooler, again, from the transmission cooler up front to the pump, and then from the rack to the cooler in front. And that allows it to basically twist, make it flexible, and as you can see, it'll push right off here to the side and just do a nice little job of kind of hanging out right below our TIPM unit in this case, or fuse box. It's actually a TIPM unit because it's more than just a fuse box, at least in this particular year of RAM. But as you can see, it just pushes there off to the side. So with that power steering pump out of the way, we can now get to the one main bolt that holds the air conditioning pump to the block, as well as at least to the, you know, one of the 2 fasteners that bolts it into the timing cover. But one thing we got to keep mindful of, you can see here that these hard air conditioning lines has this wiring harness that goes in front of it. So we need to get this wiring harness out of here next. Now we went ahead and disconnected all of the injectors and coil packs on this side. So we're just going to continue to go through and disconnect the electrical components as we can, and then be able to eventually peel kind of this harness out of the way and get it out of the way of these air conditioning lines, and then we can finally get this compressor out of here and kind of pull it this direction. And again, the goal is to set it over here on the bumper, kind of out of the way. But we got a lot of electrical to disconnect in order to get to that point, and you can see here that again, we just kind of started on it. Now the coil packs and the injectors I normally don't label because the wiring is pretty short on these, and when you go to put these back on, there's really only one injector and or coil pack the plugs will line up with. You know, but for items like this, I'll usually just slap a quick label on it, which I need to print those out real quick just so that I know that this one you know, is the one that goes to the field control for the alternator. You know, this one is their inlet air control, or inlet temperature air control, or inlet air temperature sensor. There we go. And so on and so forth. So I'm going to spend some time just disconnecting the rest of the electrical and see what we need to do to get that out, because there is an electrical connector that goes underneath the intake, one to the MDS solenoids, as well as the VVT solenoid up front. I'm thinking we're going to have to take that intake off next to get the rest of the wiring harness disconnected, so we can kind of get it out of here. Because part of the wiring harness, if you see over here, are the connections to our ECU. It's got a ground line that runs over here, and it's got a another, what, probably about 12 or 16 pin connector here on the firewall that makes up the passenger side. As you can see, it kind of snakes around the intake, hooks up to our ECU, and makes a couple of additional connections. So we'll have to get these disconnected in order to swing this harness out of here. And right now I'm just looking to see where that goes into, and it goes into, what I'm looking at is the wheel speed sensor on the passenger side. As you can see, it just kind of bundles into this harness and back here, and then hooks up here, and then goes, looks to be part of this harness here, which kind of protrudes into the firewall at that point. So the good thing is it's not running into this harness, so it's not going to stop us from disconnecting this part of the harness and just literally taking it and laying it over to the driver's side. So again, I'm going to continue to work on getting electrical connections disconnected and labeled, and then we'll more than likely, just again based on the way things look, come back and start taking the bolts and everything off in order to get the intake out of here next, to get the MDS solenoid and the VVT connector disconnected. And I went ahead and also disconnected some of our vacuum lines. And on this vacuum line, this is the end that goes to the evap purge solenoid right there underneath the battery tray. And to get this to release, it's not a horrible thing. You see on one side of this connector, you kind of have this, show it to you here. Yeah, there it is. I gotta find it again. It's got like a little little lever on it right here. You can see you can kind of pull that away, push it down and then out, and you'll see that'll open up a little bit, and that'll allow you to get it off that end. The other end of this is connected into our intake. You'll see two nipples there. It goes to the smaller one, and of course there's a larger hose that then goes to our brake booster. We went ahead and disconnected that as well. So that's where it sits, and I'll bring you back for the next piece. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just working on the passenger side here, just getting all of our electrical disconnected, like our water temperature sensor, our throttle body, cam position sensor, the oil pressure and oil temperature, which oil pressure, see if I can get you down there. See, this oil pressure is the one up front, oil temperature is the sensor on the side of where the oil filter screws into, and then underneath you've got the crank position sensor and a knock sensor, and just a couple of Christmas tree clips along the way that's holding it to various spots of the block underneath. And then once we have that, we should be able to kind of just fish this through Yeah, I'm gonna have to go underneath and kind of push that around a motor mount. Let me well, actually, let me bring you along, kind of show you what it is underneath here. Now, this is on the passenger side. And forgive the camera work until I can get you into position. And let me get you some light. There we go. So hopefully you can see that right there at the tip of the light. That's your knock sensor. We've got that one unplugged, and the cam sensor is right there again at the kind of tip of the light. That's the crank sensor, knock sensor, and then there's a Christmas tree clip that just pushed into a hole there on the motor mount to kind of hold that in place. And let me just see what we're getting to hold up here, and just finish pushing this wiring harness through. Yeah, there we go. This wasn't too bad. Just get hung up around the particulars. There we go. We should be able to pull that the rest of the way through now. It's all got to come out of here because we're pulling the motor. So, okay. So let me continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. I gotta get crawled out from underneath here. One moment. And welcome back top side. Let's see if we can get the rest of that wire pulled through there now. There we go. Okay, so these were our connectors as they were underneath. That went to our knock sensor, that went to our crank sensor, and of course these two down here that you see covered in WD-40. This was oil temperature and oil pressure on the side of that housing. Now, if you're dealing with a situation like this, where, as you can see, everything on this engine is just covered in a fine silt of dirt, just because of where it came from, or if you're just having problems in general with these locking tabs, these Chrysler red locking tabs coming undone, and I've done this in the past with other vehicles, and you're not going to hurt the electrical connector doing this, give them a little shot of WD-40, the old WD, and I find that helps soak into the connector, flushes out the debris and the dirt and the sand, and allows those red lock tabs to then come unlocked. And it also helps release those connectors as well from those points. Needless to say, just because of the amount of grime on this engine, that we will be using some component cleaner and going through and thoroughly dousing all of the ends of our connectors when we go to do our reassembly. There's also, just from people being in here previously working on this, there's some broken Christmas tree clips that we'll just kind of replace those as needed as we go through it. But that's going to be the process for now. We're just going to continue to, again, get things disconnected, unplugged, and prepped. Again, the goal is to take this whole wiring harness and just kind of push it over, lay it on the driver's side, or perhaps maybe just pick it up and kind of lay it on the front cowl of the windshield. Either way, just kind of looking to get it out of the way, I guess is the goal of it all at this point. Let's see, and we may not have to peel this harness all the way back and lay it on the opposite side, because once we get the intake off, if I remember when we did the 2009, just simply having enough slack in this harness to at least take this side of it and lay it here on the passenger side, and then take the driver's side and lay it on the side over there, was sufficient enough to give us room to get the motor out without having to disconnect the PCM connectors. But you know, if we have to, it's an option, but I don't think we have to take it that far. But obviously I'll bring you along when we get to that. So I've got some connectors here to label. You can see that we've gone through and labeled a lot of our previous ones, like throttle body, water temperature sensor. I've got to put one on the knock sensor, the knock sensor connector, the crank connector, as well as the oil temperature and oil pressure off of this side. So I'm going to take care of that and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just show you where we're at with everything is that we got our passenger side engine harness disconnected from the block and just kind of pushed off to the side at this point. And going back and kind of looking at the driver's side here, it looks like to get around this where we can move this AC compressor out of the way, we just have to move this harness. And rather than remove everything from here and pull it through this way, which would require disconnecting the ECU and all that harness that goes behind the engine, what we can do, because there's not very much here on the driver's side, after looking at this again, we can actually disconnect this side of the harness and then pull it through and lay it off to the side, and that'll get it around that compressor. So what we've done here is just disconnected the electrical for the brake master cylinder for our fluid level sensor. There is a body ground here that comes off the harness. There is a frame ground on the driver's side here, right on the rail. That gets disconnected. We've got our main battery positive disconnected off of our side connector on our TIPM, and I just put the nut back in place so we don't lose it. And just went ahead and disconnected this mating connector, which is kind of just pressed in place with some Christmas tree clips in front of the TIPM. Now, don't break this connector. Be careful with these when you're releasing these. What these are is that when you join this connector together, this lever swings forward and then pulls the connector together and locks it. So sometimes these get a little filled up full of dirt and crud, just like when you're trying to remove like one of these connectors. And you don't want to break this gray piece, because this is what acts as the release and helps to push these bigger connectors apart. So once again, just a little shot of WD-40 on that hinge side and a little bit on that hinge side. Just let it sit there for a couple minutes, and then generally you can just kind of clip this forward and unlock it, and that'll push this connector apart. So with that being connected, we got one more connector back here to undo, and then just removing some Christmas tree clips should then allow this side of the harness to fall forward, and we can just pull it through up underneath these air conditioning lines and then get that compressor out of the way. Now we still got some electrical to disconnect on this side before we can pull the block. Obviously we've got the you can see we went ahead and disconnected the electrical for our compressor and labeled it. We need to, I'm not going to label the frame ground and body ground because you know, they're where they line up, the wires are only long enough to go to one location and one location only. So on this side we still have starter wiring to disconnect and the driver's side knock sensor to disconnect. But what I'm going to do next is just pull these Christmas tree clips out of this harness on this side and see if we can swing this thing to the side. Looks like we've got one more electrical connector to undo, and that's right here. It goes to our EVAP purge solenoid. So once we get that one done and our Christmas tree clips out of here, we should be able to pull this harness out of the way, or at least get it untangled from our AC compressor. So let me work on getting this one last connector done in these clips, and then connector here, connector on the purge valve, and these clips, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just wanted to show you this correction. There's actually 3 connectors on this side of the TIPM, on the side to remove. So I just want to clarify that. So you got the bigger one up here, which has that, again, that gray lever on it. You got this smaller oval looking one, which sits below that. And then also below this one is this smaller gray connector you see here, which has got a yellow wire on it. If I'm not mistaken, that's the one that goes to the sensors for the front airbag setup. So again, just want to, at least on this one, just want to clarify there were 3 on this side, and as you can see now, we've got this harness freed up. I just need to pop some clips and get it out of the way. So I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. Apologize for the view. So we're underneath and we're on the driver's side, just disconnecting our electrical that you see here. So we're disconnected from our starter and our knock sensor. So, you know, on your starter, you just got your stereotypical main battery positive. You got your solenoid wire, which is just a clip. And of course, we've got the clip for the knock sensor on this side as well, now disconnected. So on this side, that only leaves, and let me see if I can point it out to you here. You're going to see a ground, an engine, let's see, yeah, a block ground, which is just on the other side of the motor mount, right there, behind the air compressor. You can kind of see where the wiring harness goes up to it. We need to get that one broken loose, and that'll be the final electrical connector, at least as far as the engine harness is concerned, on the driver's side here. And yeah, we still have to get underneath here at some point and, you know, unbolt our exhaust manifolds, take our starter out, drop this inspection plate slash brace in order to get our torque converter bolts out, and of course our bell housing bolts. Oh, we've got a lot done, but we've still got a lot more to go, so it should be interesting. So what I'm going to work on next is getting that engine ground, or block ground, engine ground I guess would be a correct way of calling it, getting that out of there, and then we'll see about getting this harness pulled out, and then we'll be able to drop the AC compressor. So let me go ahead and work on that ground, and I'll bring you back. One moment. Oh, and also on this starter, remember, you've got a heat shield, or you should have a heat shield that sits right about here, that it protects it from the heat of this catalytic converter slash exhaust pipe. And just to show that to you, it's that piece right there, held in place by 2 bolts. Sits up in there kind of like that. And then with that shield removed, then you can get to all your starter wiring. Okay, one moment. And welcome back. So we've got our engine block ground disconnected. Now there was a little metal tab right here. You can kind of see it. Hopefully you can see. Yeah, you should be able to see that in camera view. That was attached to the wiring harness. That was secured by the back bolt for the air compressor. I'm sorry, not air conditioning compressor. So we went ahead and took the bolt out, loosened it up, took it out temporarily, and then threaded it back in loosely, so that way when we take the 2 AC bolts, compressor bolts, out of the timing cover, it doesn't just, you know, drop and hit the frame. So with that being said, this wiring harness is now free on this side. So we're going to go back top side, and we're going to see if we can finish fishing the rest of this harness out. And I'll bring it right back. And welcome back. So we're back top side, and you can see that we've got our wiring harness pulled out of here now, out from underneath, and kind of just pushed on the other side of our AC line, so that way we can finish disconnecting our bolts, or removing the bolts, or loosening the bolts for our AC compressor, and hopefully just be able to, again, swing that out of here and get that out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and concentrate on doing that. We just got the 1 main bolt. If you remember, we loosened that up to get the bracket out for the wiring harness. And we just got the 2 bolts left that go into the timing cover. So once we'll get that loose, we'll drop that out, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So as you can see, 3 bolts later, and the air conditioning compressor is just kind of pushed over here on the side again. So we have the, and I forgot to mention, we did take, if you'll notice, we did take that center, there's a center support piece that holds the air conditioning lines right about here. Obviously we had to take that off to be able to move this, and we just got it down here in the bag. And normally that piece right there is where your 2 AC lines are running from, that go in the front of the intake. Now it's got to come off because we got to take the intake and obviously the engine out of there. But you can see you've got enough flexibility. We're right where these lines flex, just to kind of take it, push it off to the side and kind of let it just sit right here. And for now, what I'll do, just so I'm not constantly stressing these lines, until we, as long as it's not in our way, I'll just kind of let it sit on the lower cross member, and it's kind of in its natural position. And then when we need it, we'll just kind of push it, maybe bungee cord it somewhere off here, just kind of keep it pushed that way. And again, this is all in an effort not to have to crack this system open, because then we'd have to obviously have a vacuum drawn on it, pull it down, recharge it, so on and so forth. And we may have a leak right there. You'll notice that's discolored right past here versus not there. I mean, the AC was working on here, but it may have a slow leak in it. Obviously, having these lines disconnected from the radiator is also key, because it's going to need the flex that it can get out of these lines with this condenser setting loose to kind of, again, to allow you to swing it and kind of push it off to the side. So we got 3 bolts. They all look to be the same, just 2 for the timing cover, 1 for the back. So now that you can see that we've got our compressor out of the way and we've got our kind of our wiring harness here, we can now just take our main wiring harness and just throw it over here inside the battery tray. And then as we get more of this harness disconnected, then we can just kind of continue to peel it up this way, and by chance possibly just even throw it over the cowl here and just kind of let it sit in the windshield a little bit, just to, again, help push it out of our way, so that way when we go to pull the motor, we're not dealing with it, or don't want to deal with it, and also by chance don't want to inadvertently damage it either. So I think what I'm going to do is going to call this video at this point. We're probably about maybe the 20 or 30 minute mark, at least as far as what you see in editing and me stopping the camera. As far as actual work itself, it's a good longer than 20 or 30 minutes, let's just put it that way. But we made some good headway today. We've gotten a lot of the electrical disconnected. You can see, again, we've got the passenger side pushed off to the side. We've got the driver's side mostly disconnected and kind of pushed out of the way. At this point, we've got some more disconnecting to do. We've got some more Christmas tree clips to undo from this valve cover. But before we can do that, what I want to do is, let's get this intake off of here in the next video. And then that will allow us to disconnect the MDS solenoids that are underneath, the VVT solenoid that's also underneath the intake. And then when we have this intake out of here, we can finish popping our Christmas tree clips and push this harness the rest of the way out, or at least off to the side. So we'll get the intake off in the next video. We'll get the brake booster out of here in the next video, and then crawl back underneath at that point and start to take the starter out, disconnect the exhaust manifolds, so on and so forth. We've got coolant lines up here we still need to disconnect. We will eventually get to that point, but like I said, I think we made good headway today. We're going to call this a video, and we'll bring you back for the next one. And again, I'd like to save this for the very end. If you have subscribed already, I thank you immensely for doing so. If you have not, please consider doing so. It goes a long way to help supporting the channel. The more view hours we get, the more ads that we can show, the better the ad revenue. So again, subscribers and watch hours is kind of where the game's at this point. It's the only thing I ask you to do. It's free in both those. Subscribing doesn't cost you anything, and also sitting and watching the ads play only costs you a little bit of time. And with that, I hope you found this useful, and I will bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.